Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon. That back there is Bernard. He's my October co-host. And today we have another book talk video to share with you guys. Today was originally supposed to be the first book talk-a-ween video, where I'm doing reviews of scary books throughout October, but right before that was about to happen, I saw that James Frey had a new book out and I wanted to pick it up and read it and get it up here as soon as possible. So Book Talk-a-ween starts next Friday. So for now, let's jump into Katerina by James Frey. So those of you might be familiar with James Frey. Back in, I want to say 2004-ish, he put out a book called A Million Little Pieces. It became an absolutely huge international bestseller. It dealt with his battle with addiction, which of course is always one of those topics that just really pulls at the heartstrings. And it blew up, so much so that Oprah chose it for one of her book club selections. This made Oprah's many fans run out and purchase it and read it. She had James on, and he played the part. You know, he played the part of who he was supposed to be as a man who wrote this memoir. Shortly after that, the website The Smoking Gun came out with a whole thing about how they had been fact-checking some of the book and have found out that a lot of it wasn't true. And, you know, that became a huge scandal. James wasn't really affected. I mean, I'm sure he was embarrassed and, you know, it couldn't have felt good being dragged through the mud, but aside from that, which I mean is a big deal, but aside from that, but on the more business side of that, the book still flew off the shelves. After the whole thing, it sold millions and millions of more copies. So, I don't know. So how do you guys feel about that? Do you remember when that all happened? So after it all blew up, Oprah had him back on the show in a moment of television history that was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable. I hated every second of it. And yeah, how their story ends together, at least publicly, is a few years after that. I think it was 2011, 2012. It was right before she was ending her show, I think. She had him back on and she kind of apologized to him for pouncing on him the way she did. And I thought that was nice. I thought that was good because, you know, I try to put myself in other people's shoes as much as possible. And I try to think of if I was, you know, a relatively young writer. He was, what, 30 when that came out? I don't know. Around that age, I think. You know, and if your publishers were like, oh, this is a memoir, this will sell great as a memoir, like maybe me or you would have been like, yeah, okay, publish it as a memoir. Like, who does it hurt? Maybe? I don't know. It's so hard to say unless you've been in that position, of course. That brings us now to Katerina. Since the whole Million Little Pieces thing, James has been working. He started a YA series that I can't remember the name of right now, but there's been a whole bunch of books in that series. He hasn't written them all, but he's kind of overseen the writing of it, and a group of writers have completed them under a pen name. Also, after A Million Little Pieces and its companion book, My Friend Leonard, he put out 2 other adult books. One was called The Last Testament of the Holy Bible, and then the other one was called Bright Shiny Morning. And now that brings us up to Katerina. Katerina's interesting. It's written in the same style that A Million Little Pieces was, that sort of manic, frantic, no punctuation or hardly any punctuation mess that A Million Little Pieces was written in. There's a lot of repetition, him saying the same words and same phrases over and over again. I didn't know This is a hard book talk for me to film just because I'm not 100% sure how I felt about this book. Maybe I will by the time we're done talking about it, but I don't quite know what to say about it. When I was about halfway through, I thought to myself, I said, I'm not filming a video on this. I don't know what to say, and I try to keep my book talks fairly positive. If I read a book and it's awful, I don't really want to talk about it because I know no matter what, the author put themselves into this book and then they put it out into the world. And maybe I just don't like the genre or the style or the story. So if I think a book is bad, I try not to do a book talk on it. If it's a scenario where I just had some problems with a book, I'll still do a talk on it because I can give positive feedback along with the things that I didn't like. And that's when I will keep going with a book talk. And eventually I got to the point where I thought to myself, okay, I can do that. There's some positives here. Let's get into it now. Katerina is, I saw a man on Goodreads, he worded it like this, and I thought it was brilliant. Katerina is a memoir disguised as fiction about a piece of fiction disguised as a memoir. So this book, James Frey is the main character of this book. They call him Jay, but it's clearly James Frey. Even down to at one point he talks about the uniform he wears, and it's khaki pants and a white t-shirt. And every time I've seen James Frey, you know, even in the author photo here, you can tell he's in that white t-shirt and khaki pants. Like, so, you know, any doubt that you have that this is not about James Frey gets taken away the more you get into the book. So Katerina takes place in two separate periods. It takes place in Paris in the early 1990s, and it takes place in Los Angeles in 2017. So when we see James in Paris in 1992 and 1993, he's young, he's adventurous, he's just come from America to Paris where he hopes to live for a year or two with money that he saved up before he left. He's ready to take on the world. He wants to be a writer. And this is where some of it gets real cringy for me, real cringy. Like, maybe when I was in my 20s, I would have thought this book was, or not even 20s, when I was in my late teens, I would have thought this book was real edgy. But it's just, that kind of chaos loses its edge, loses its entertainment. And, you know, and I get that, you know, we meet James again in 2017 after the whole Million Little Pieces thing has happened. He's married with a bunch of kids. He's still working as a writer. He's not living that crazy lifestyle anymore. He's a much more, you know, stereotypical middle-aged man, but he still yearns for those times. As I guess, you know, maybe we all do to some degree. We all look back on the, you know, the good old days and miss parts of it. So in 1992, Jay is writing, and he keeps saying over and over again, whenever anybody asks him about the writing, he tells them he's gonna burn the world down. And that is so cringy. That's so cringy. That's what, you know, 16-year-olds say when they're... I couldn't with that. I couldn't. And it's repeated so often, and it's so cringy. The other part that made me cringe every time I read it was he eventually meets this girl named Katerina in Paris. She is a model. They meet at a sort of park called the Gates of Hell, and they get to know each other, and they run into each other at various points throughout his time there. And at first she's kind of like, you know, I don't want you to know where I live. I don't want you to know my number. If we're supposed to see each other again, we'll see each other. And that goes on for a little bit. And they do keep running into each other because they kind of run in similar circles in similar areas of town. kind of, although he tends to go to the more dive bars and she goes to the more fancier places, but sometimes the places they go intersect. And they develop nicknames for each other, and she calls him Writer Boy and he calls her Model Girl, and it caused a physical reaction in me every time I read that. I was like, oh no, stop. And I'm guessing, you know, when you're in that situation with a person, you know, that's cute to you and that feels cute to you, but when you're someone reading it from the outside, it's absolutely garbage and I hate it. So there. So the Paris in 1992, it shows us a James Frey, or a J, who is on a fast track bullet train to the James Frey from A Million Little Pieces. He's out all night. He's having sex with anybody who will have him. He's drinking literally day and night. And he's to the point where if he doesn't drink, he gets the shakes and he has to drink to stop the shakes. So, you know, it's definitely grim. He's doing cocaine occasionally in bathrooms, but it's not until he returns home to America that he really gets deep into the drugs that lead him to his rock bottom. And so the 1992 part of the book ends right when he's returning home. So we know that pretty soon after that is when A Million Little Pieces would start. And then when it's going to the Los Angeles 2017 portion, we're meeting, like I said, James Frey, who's married, who has kids, who's a successful author. He's getting in touch with Katerina. That's the whole kind of thing that starts the book and the Los Angeles 2017 portion. He gets an anonymous message from this girl who, when they last saw each other in 1992 in Paris, they parted ways very badly. It ended in an absolute mess. So yeah, like I say, the James Frey 2017, he's been through the Oprah thing, although when they talk about her, they don't call her Oprah, they call it like the talk show, because, you know, but we know it's Oprah. And he talks about the experience of that, you know, how it affected his life and whatnot. But like I said, he had the smarts to label this one as fiction so that he could, I'm sure, take a ton of liberties and not have to worry about the backlash. But the people who are familiar with James Frey and his other works will know that will know that this is him, and this is a continuation of a story. It's kind of the prequel and continuation of a story. Now to give kind of a quick rundown of the good and the bad of the book. From my opinion. You might have a totally different opinion, and that's awesome. If you loved it, you loved it. That's great. The things I liked. I liked that it gave us more insight into the Million Little Pieces thing. It gave us more insight into who James Frey may or may not be. But to me it feels like maybe it's authentic. There were passages that I found to be pretty profound. There weren't many of them, but there were a few. You know, when he wasn't rambling on about burning the world down or having really cringy nicknames for his girlfriend, there were some passages that were profound, and I thought they held some insight, and I enjoyed them. What I didn't like is, first of all, my God, the sex scenes. I can appreciate a good sex scene, but there are so many in this book. There's so many. And they're all the same. It's all like, okay, here's some rando he's met at the bar and he's gonna have sex with her now. And here's this person and they're gonna have sex outside. And it's all the same. And I don't know if he's trying to convince us that when he was a kid, he had no problems having sex with lots of strangers. I don't know what the point is. I don't get the point. if the point is that he was reckless and, you know, out of his head from the booze and maybe the cocaine, then I guess, but I feel like a few would have been enough. There's too many. Too many. I wasn't here for it. And, like, if you are bothered by explicit sex scenes, don't read this. Do not. It's half of the book. Definitely a third, if not a half. Definitely a third. I didn't like how hard it felt like he was trying to force on us that he's the next Bukowski, Henry Miller, Hunter S. Thompson, that edgy, sort of messy writer that defines a generation. He wants us real bad to think that, and I don't know that I think that. But, yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't like the repetition, but like I said, there were some passages that were insightful, and I felt like we got a glimpse into more of a glimpse into who James maybe is. And, you know, I don't know. You guys, I don't know. I don't know how to end this. If you're curious, I mean, pick it up, give it a read. Like I said, it's interesting in the ways that it's woven together with a million little pieces, and that timeline, the way the timelines are woven together, that's interesting to me. But like I said, if you don't like the pretty graphic sex scenes that happen frequently, don't read it. But if you're curious and you want to know what's going on, I mean, and like I said, this is just my opinion. You might have read it and you might have loved it, and if you did, all the power to you. And I look forward to, you know, seeing what happens next for James Frey. It's I feel like life couldn't have been easy for him, you know, with the demons he faced, and then the public shit show that came for him and the way he was dragged. I feel like that couldn't have been easy, and I'm glad that he was able to write his books and tell his stories. And even if, you know, they're not my exact cup of tea, I'm glad they exist, and I'm glad that he was able to do it. So there you go, you guys. Those are my very jumbled thoughts on Katerina. I didn't want to go through the story piece by piece as I sometimes do, or often do in my book talks, just because the material doesn't really lend itself to that. There's a lot of days that are just repetitions of the day before and the day to come, and I felt like this was a better way. I will say, if you're curious as to why Katerina got in touch with Jay in 2017, definitely give that a read. I liked the ending. I liked that final paragraph. I liked that. Even though a lot of the book had me thinking, what's the point of any of this? Why is this a book? I did like the ending. I like where it left off. Alright, so there you go, you guys. Katerina, James Frey. If you've read it, please let me know down in the comments down below what you thought of it. And I will see you guys on Monday. Bye.